Hey, Louise here, and you know the feeling. You've poured your heart out into this beautiful rag quilt, and the seams are frayed. They're nice and fluffy. It looks great, but then what about this? What about the edges? They just fall flat. There's just nothing there to give them any life. They're so underwhelming. What do we do to fix this? Whether you use your scrap strips or you use jelly rolls, I'm going to show you how to make a fantastic border for your rag quilt that's going to make your edges far more substantial. They're going to give you something to hang on to. It's going to have better frayed edges. And there's no batting included. We're just using cotton fabric. Quilting cotton, that's all it is. Nothing special. You are going to love how easy this is and how wonderful it looks. So come on, let me show you all the details. Creating a rag quilt border is very easy. I want to show you I have my backing and I have my center fabric and I have my top. Now because the back of the quilt has a lot of black in it, I chose that one. Of course, that's going to go down. And this is essentially how we're going to layer our border because we need to have the same 3 layers as we do in the quilt. But what I'm going to do first is make sure I trim off the selvages from both ends. And you want to get all of it. You know, sometimes there's the little holes along the perforations here where the needles hold the fabric as it runs through the press. And with that, we need to make sure it's removed because it's more tightly woven right there, and that's not going to fray. So in order to set up our border, we want to get our 3 layers in order. And the backing goes down, and this is just like we do a rag quilt, just like we do the squares within the quilt. And then we're going to put the middle and then the top. And I'm putting the lighter fabric to the top simply because I want the front of the quilt to be brighter. And then this will just be a darker fray in the middle, but that's okay because we have the dark on the background. Now, as I'm doing this, what I generally do is sew all my strips together the full length of the quilt. So let's say I have a 45 inches. I think I'm between 45 and 50 inches on this quilt. So let's say it's 45 inches. So 45 is 90 inches around 2 sides. I'm going to need another 90 for a total of 180 inches. So I would probably make up a 200-inch piece of my binding. And the first thing I would do is sew all my tops together and sew all my backs together. Don't worry about the middle. I'm going to show you how we take care of that. But let me find the seam. There it is. So when we sew it together, I always want to take a 1/2-inch seam on the top as well as the back and then open that seam. The other thing that's important is that these seams don't fall in the same place. If they're going to be on top of each other, cut a piece off one end and put it to the other so they're offset. A lot of times I'll just cut 12 inches off one end, put it to the end, and then I'm good. Now the middle layer, I don't do anything as far as attaching it. I overlap it by about 1 inch. So that's going to be held in place, but the reason I do that is it's going to fray better if there's no seam. If there's a seam, it gets a little bulkier, and that's going to be okay on the border, but if it's not necessary, I don't want to do that. So you're going to put everything together along the way to get a long enough piece that you need, and then at the end, I always leave it open just in case I need to add a few extra pieces. Then I have this open and I can come in and do what I need to do. I'm really excited about rag quilts. I love them and they're such fun. And you can see behind me there are a couple here with the ruffled borders that I'm anxious to show you how to make. But just some different ideas for rag quilting. Change it up a little, make it more exciting and playful. I'm Louise from Inspired Quilting by Louise, and I would love to have you join me in this course. So sign up, let's get started. I'll see you on the other side. Now, when you're attaching your binding, you want to make sure it's secured together because you have these 3 layers and they can slip and move around on you as you're sewing. So when you're ready to put this on your quilt, you want to make sure it's all secured. Now, what I do is I take a straight stitch down the middle, and it goes through both sides. Now, you can't really see a lot of the stitching. You can see the gray here, and I have black on the back, so it's not very visible. But I'll go right down the middle from one end all the way to the other, except for that last few inches that I always leave unsewn. But then, because this now is going to be my outer edge, so this will attach to my quilt, and then this will be my outer edge, and this is going to be frayed. So before I attach it to the quilt, it's much easier to sew this, again, all the way from one edge. Just feed it through, all 200 inches, however far you need to go. And then you're going to come back and you're going to do it again. We're going to reinforce that edge with a second row of stitching. You can put it directly on top. You can put it next to it. Don't let this clipped edge be any less than 1/2 inch. If you're going to put them side by side, put the extra stitch line to the inside. And I think you'll be happier with it that way, because then you'll get the extra fraying out here. So once that part is done, just like this one is, so this isn't sewn over here because this is going to be attached directly to my quilt. The middle stitching simply holds everything in place, just like we do the X on the big squares. And I showed you on the other quilts, the small ones. Let me show you that real quick, how that works. Here's a baby quilt that I did. It hasn't been washed yet, but it has the border on it. So you see, there's the border seam, and here is where the clipping is, and there's 2 rows of stitching right there. So the border goes on just like this, and we're going to come back after and clip that edge just like the other seams in the quilt. But if we get all this done ahead of time, it's much easier to clip this while it's unattached than once you've already sewn it on. So I will sew this piece in its entirety down the middle and then down the 2 edges. And then I'll come back with my clippers and I'll just get this all clipped along the way. And then I'm ready to sew this on. What I want to show you is this is no different than we do generally just what I call a stacked border instead of a miter. You just add a piece, bring it down, and then you put another piece on top of that to square it off. And that's exactly how we do it on a rag quilt. And this one, let's see. So you can just see, I'm going to show you how to do this clipping too, because this can get a little tricky because there's a lot right there. And there's a couple ways to do it where we don't get the knotting to become problematic. Okay, so now you've seen this. I do want to show you the current quilt that I'm working on and how that's coming. When you attach your border, you're going to put the backs together. And there's not going to be anything visible. It's just going to be a regular seam. You're going to put your border to the back side. Now, this, you can see we have the center stitching and we have that outer stitching. Now, I didn't clip this ahead of time simply because I wanted to get this done so I could show you on the video, but I will come back and I'll clip that. I put this, when I start, my first border piece, about 1/4 inch above where that rag quilting is. That way it gives me a little wiggle room when I'm coming back to put the final border edge on. And so I just sew this all the way down. And when I get down here, there it is, I just cut it off. And again, say I leave that little 1/4 inch. And for me, that's just, my fudge factor, just in case something's crooked or skewed or who knows what. And once I get this sewn, then I'm going to cut it and I'm going to open this part out so that I can add the extra piece on. And I'm going to do the same thing, just come down this 1/2 inch, and then I'll come back after and we'll do that trimming. But I want to make sure it's square and, nice and straight. So I'm going to do that with a ruler. This I just did with my scissors. Now you can see as I came around, I ran out. So what I'm going to do now is take the piece that I currently have prepared, and I'm going to add it. Now this is part of why we leave an open end on each side. I just got to make sure I get the right end. Okay, because I want the end that has the double stitching row here and the double stitching row here. That way, when I put them together, all that is in place where it needs to go. And then all I'll have to do is sew this. But you can see how this gets sewn on. There's our what do I want to say? There's our seam line. And I just make sure that these seams are open as I do it. Now, if you remember, I suggested at the end of making this quilt in the last video that you do a quick run around the entire edge and then clip it. That way it secures the edges. But I'm telling you, you know, when you're doing this, just grab a hold of the edge of your rag quilt, and you get out to the edge and it's like it's flimsy. And I don't feel like it's very sturdy at all. But you get this border on here and it's like, okay, this is substantial. It's going to hold itself in place. It's going to hold up. I can grab it and, you know, someone's going to pull it, whatever. It's going to hold up to it. So that's the reasoning behind this. Now, I am going to sew this together. Where's that end? I want to just show you the quick fix here. So I'm just going to take this and this. Oop, look at that. I didn't get the selvage off there. Let me cut that right now so I don't forget. And there we are. Okay, so I will sew this outside piece to this outside piece. And I'm okay mixing up colors like this. This is a scrappy quilt. That's why I'm keeping the reds to the front and the blacks to the back. So I'll sew this together. I'm not going to worry about that middle piece, but then I'm also going to sew the black piece together with right sides together. Oh my goodness, there it is, like this. And so I'll do the 1/2 inch there as well. And then we're on our way, we're good. And that's going to line up perfectly. And then this white fabric, the lighter in between, will just overlap however much is there. You want to have at least 1 inch, but if you have more, that's not really going to be a problem. But this works out well the way the seams are falling because they're not going to be right next to each other. So that's where we are. I'm going to go ahead and finish this. I'll attach it. I'll go around and see how far this is going to take me. And then we can take a look at the corners and how we'll finish those off and how to trim them so that you can get everything clipped. The first thing I'm going to do is add my 2 border pieces. I'm going to join them right sides together, and I'm going to take that 1/2 inch seam that we talked about from one side to the other. And you see I have my walking foot on here. I always use my walking foot when I'm making a rag quilt. Okay, that was simple. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the 2 front pieces. And let me just finger press that. That'll make it all go a little easier later on. So I finger press that open. And I use my nail. You know, I get serious and say, okay, we're not going to be folding up here. Now this one got a little short. Now I could trim it back. Whoops, excuse me. I could take some of the seam that I've sewn out, but I'm okay working around this. It's not that difficult. And I just want to make sure everything else is out of the way. Now, if you find that your quilt hanging over the edge of your machine over to the side there is problematic, grab your ironing board and adjust it to the height of your table, or get a tall chair with a back on it, and you can just drape your quilt over that, because if it starts pulling over, by the time it's getting down to the ground, there's a lot of fabric there, and that's a lot of weight. And it's going to be very hard to sew straight if you're competing against the drag of the quilt. All right, seam 2. So our top seam is taken care of, and I'm going to finger press that open. just like this. So we have our seam here. We have our middle right there. And the other, oh yeah, see, we've got easily 1.25 inches there. It just looked a bit scant the way I was holding it. Make sure I get all my threads cut. And I don't know if I've mentioned, if you've watched me do rag quilts before, you will know I say this a lot. When you have little threads like this, threads from what you've been sewing, trim them as close to the fabric as possible, because these threads are distinctly different than the threads that are used to weave the fabric, and they're going to stand out. Their texture, their twist, everything about them is different, and you're just going to see that piece. You know, it's like that really thick white hair that you have in the middle of your head that sticks straight up and curls. You know, it's there for everybody to see. Not that I have any of those. I've just heard about that. Okay, now, right here, I have my center that I've sewn to this part and to this part. So I'm just going to run a straight stitch down this middle because that's going to secure everything. So as I'm sewing my border on, nothing's going to come loose, particularly that middle fabric. Now, you notice I have my walking foot. Always, always, that's a must. And I have my non-stick needles. The Schmetz non-stick needles are wonderful. And I think they have like a Teflon coating or some kind of a coating on it that allows it to slip through the fabric more easily without a lot of friction, apparently, as I'm guessing the way it works, because you have less thread breakage. But what I also like, and I keep it on the card so I can find it, but not everybody is aware that this little guy slides out and this folds back, and then you can just pull out the needle you need. I take from this side, but then when I'll have an old empty pack like this, I'll put them in, but I'll put them in backwards. You see how this is the curved side up? I'll put it with the flat side up, and then that way I know that that's a used needle, because sometimes either in an emergency or some kind of crafty projects you want to sew, but you don't want to use your good needles. But anyways, I'm going to put a link to this down below. I buy them on Amazon. I don't see them in quilt shops, but I really like how they work. And I get the pack. This is a 14, which I'm using for rag quilt, but it also comes in a 12. And there's usually a 2-pack where you can get a pack of each together. But anyways, just in case you do a lot of rag quilting, you will definitely appreciate this. So I'm just going to sew down the middle here. And meet up with my other seam. And I'll overstitch by about 1 inch, just that way I don't have to worry about that coming undone. And again, you see I trim everything really, really close. All right, so now that's taken care of. And let's see, where am I here? Okay, I did something really silly, and I'm not going to go back and fix it because it's okay as it is. But I should have joined the other end. Okay, and this is a good teaching moment. We're going to take advantage of it. So you see right here, whoops, look at, see that thread? Oh my goodness, can't have that. But this is where I need to pick up and do my stitching. So I sewed down the center, and then I sewed this side. Remember, we do the two double stitching on that outer edge to reinforce it. And then this is the edge we sew to the quilt. Well, come down here and look at where my double stitching is. It's on the side that I'm going to sew to the quilt, which is fine. It doesn't hurt anything. It's just duplication of work, because when I'm finished, then I'll come back and I'll do the stitching around the outer edge. But I just want you to know that, you know, everybody has challenges along the way. Nothing is ever, you know, without a bit of drama or some such thing happening. All right, so I have this right here. Now it looks like this is double stitched, but this is the original stitching when I finished this quilt off. But then, like I said, I don't like the edge without a border. So I just wanted to get this border in here, and I just like it a whole lot better. I had a couple pieces that were particularly long, my squares, and I just sort of left it in there and let it fray. And I think it looks okay. It's just a little different, but that's okay. All right, I just want to make sure I line my borders up. Now, I sew either on the previous stitching or to the inside towards the quilt. That way, this will not show up as a seam line on the back of the quilt. But as scrappy and as much as is going on this quilt, I can't imagine we'd see anything back there anyways. And I always stop with my needle down because it's very easy for this heavy quilt to slip a little. All right, get this lined up here, make sure everything looks good. All right, and we're good to go. And as I come to a seam, I make sure that I'm not sewing over any of the clipped edges. I try and go between where it's cut. And you just keep working all the way down the side. And when I get to the other end, I just sew all the way right off the edge. And I just make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. And I'll trim my thread off here. And now I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to open this out. I'm going to start with this piece, and let's see, I got to make sure I get it going the right way. Back to back, remember, it's so easy to get that confused because it's like we're working in reverse. We're so used to right sides together. All right, so I have this lined up here, and I have about 1/4 of an inch up there in both directions. And I'm just going to get started. I'm going to line up with this here because that's where the seam is. I'm not going to go, 1/2 inch from here. It's going to be from this piece here because that's where the seam is on the back. All right, I'm going to get myself lined up because I have a seam coming. I want to make sure this seam lines up with this edge. And I'm going to open these. Let's see, where's my 1/2 inch? Right there. So I'm going to go right for that seam line right there. And now I just follow this seam line all the way through. That worked out really well. I got down to the end and I only have about 1 inch of my border left, so that leaves just one side to go. So I'm going to make one more strip and put it on, and then we'll get to the clipping and this will be finished. The borders are attached, they're all sewn in place. Now I need to clip them so I can wash it. And what I want to show you is how we do this corner, because we have the long seam here, and then this one that comes across, and then this is sewn open up here. So there's a lot of places where these seam allowance are kind of sewn in place, and we need to loosen them up. If you do a lot of rag quilts, you will definitely appreciate having the clippers, the seam clippers, and it just makes it so much easier. And I apologize, I just oiled these yesterday so they'd be in good shape, but it's squeaking. I didn't quite get it all the way in there apparently, so forgive the squeaks. But you'll notice I just trimmed that little corner off right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in next to the seam on both sides. Actually, I'm going to come right in between that seam. And then I'm going to come in once on each side. So what we're doing is opening this up, and you can see how this is going to spread out. And when these threads loosen and come out in the wash, this is going to fray. By cutting that corner off, we eliminate it from doing, from creating a lot of knots, because that's the big thing I find with the corners is you get the knotting. Now, we already trimmed here, we clipped with this, because remember when we clip, we want to clip towards the seam. Now our seam runs this way, so I'm going to clip towards it, and I usually start right in the middle here at the seam, and I trim and clip it on each side of the seam, and then I work my way out. That way I make sure everything gets clipped and it's going to fray really well, just like this. And when I get to a place where I've sewn, I clip right on each side, because that's okay if that comes loose and pulls out, because we don't need that piece right there. That's okay. We're going to work around that. That's going to be just fine. And then we're going to clip this, and you just work your way around. So you've got the corner, and now all you have to do is go around the rest of the quilt like this, and you're in great shape. It's going to be all finished. It's going to be beautiful. And I'm going to finish this up real quick, put it in the wash, and just wait until you see the finale. Oh my goodness, borders make such a difference. Here's my beautiful Christmas rag quilt. I love the scrappy look of it with the scrappy blocks, and that border just adds just enough around the edge. It's not a significant addition, but it's there for me to secure those edges, but it also finishes the quilt very nicely. And I've washed it once. You can see up close how the fraying looks. And it was a quick wash, so I'll probably do it again, because each washing will bring out a little bit more of that fluffy look. And I just really like how the scrappy border works on this quilt and just brings out so much color. So you see why I love this, and I hope you'll give it a try. I hope you might also consider my Ruffled Rag Quilt Border course that I'm offering at a great discount, by the way, and it's such fun. I know you'll love doing it, and you'll really appreciate having it on your rag quilts. So with that said, I'm going to call this a finished quilt. So you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm so glad you hung in here this long. Thank you so much for watching. It is such a pleasure for me to have you join and follow along. I appreciate that so very much. So fantastic day, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks again now. Bye-bye.